What's up, my friends? It's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And last week, we decided we were going to go on a little family getaway to the teeny tiny little mountain town of Story, Wyoming, which is just magical. I don't want to spoil the secret. Maybe I just did. It's a super cool place to go and hang out. It's this town in the woods, the little roly-poly bears and stuff hanging around in there. And all of the little cottages are super old and cobbled together and beautiful and enchanting. It's like a fairy tale forest. And we decided that we were going to pack up and try to do a reading retreat with family, play some board games, hang out, lay really, really low. It's a big storm rolling in, so we were going to get snow and get all cozied up in this little cabin out in the woods. And so we start packing to get ready to go and do this thing. And all of us really overpacked. We had a tough time parting ways with our stuff, which is what the whole point of the exercise was, to part ways with our stuff and clear our minds and be humans again for a little while. And it took multiple iterations of packing to get it down to one truck bed full of stuff. But I say again, the point of the trip was to get away from our stuff, and it was very hard for us not to pack all of our stuff. Why? Because we're humans, all five of us, and humans really like stuff. Why is that? Why do we like our stuff so much? Well, in part, I think status. We've explored that, as you and I have talked in this environment before. There's certain things that you can have that make you feel like you mean something, that did achieve something. There's sentimentality, stuff that reminds us of where we've been and what we're connected to, and that tells a story about who we are, how we'd like to be perceived. And there's stuff that is representative of necessity, and necessity can always go in quotes a little bit. Only a few things really fall into that category. And then there's stuff beyond that that probably just falls more into the range of extending our power, our reach, our influence. Overwhelmingly, that's what technology does. It just enhances our ability to bend the world to our will, and maybe this is a good thing. But in that regard, our stuff is an extension of ourself, and our money is the most rudimentary form of our stuff, the most elemental form of our stuff. Well, maybe the actual body and the actual self is the most elemental form of what we own. But beyond that, money is the commodification of our time. It's converting our time and our ideas and our energy and our presence into something that has buying power out there in the world and in the market. And probably mostly that's okay. But as we look at Matthew chapter 22, I think we have to acknowledge that this is maybe the 5th, 6th, 7th time that we've encountered in the book of Matthew where this idea of stuff being a little bit problematic comes up. Now, as we've been looking at this little anecdote here where the Pharisees send out their younglings along with the odd partners, the Herodians, to go and try and trap Jesus in this question about taxes to Caesar. We've been looking at this passage. I've made the case that I think what's really going on here, what's at the heart of Jesus' teachings and why this is included, is because it is a follow-through. It is a punctuation of the point that Jehovah Jireh, God is provider. God is the one who ultimately meets needs. He is the one who has a storehouse of provision that goes beyond physical capacity, and anything from the physical world that promises provision is entirely conditional, often short-lived, and guaranteed at some point to ultimately disappoint, because none of the stuff that we've been able to come up with, nothing you can buy, in the end, makes death go away and gives you completion and ultimate longevity and ultimate meaning. We don't have the item, the thing that does that. So God is provider, I think, is at the heart of this passage. And then I think the key payoff as we get down toward the end is that Jesus isn't really messing with the question of taxes. Like, yeah, I don't know, whatever, his face is on it, pay him the coin. But whose image is on you? And God's image is on you. And therefore, you give the little pieces of metal and trinkets and whatever to Caesar. I guess that's what he needs to feel good about himself, fine. But more importantly, God's image is on people, and we should give to God what is God's. That's the bigger, more important question. And so I know a lot of folks look at this passage and it's very, very important to them politically to be like, this is the one that settles the thing and what the right relationship between people and government should be. I just don't see that at all. It doesn't make sense contextually. It doesn't make sense with the very next question that we get here. I think those two themes that I just mentioned, God as provider and the image of God on you and giving back to God what is made in his image, I think those are the key points here. But I think at a third level, the other theme that this deals with is just stuff in general. And we have seen that come up a bunch. I referenced Matthew chapter 6 yesterday. I think it was yesterday. The stuff from the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is saying, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but instead You want to store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust don't destroy and where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, that's where your heart is going to be also. No one can serve two masters. He's going to hate the one and be devoted to the other. He's going to despise the one and love the other. I'm getting this paraphrase pretty much right. And then Jesus wraps up that flow of thought saying you cannot serve both God and money. And you might remember all the way back when we were talking about Matthew chapter 6 that term money, sometimes translated mammon. It's a word that doesn't really mean a lot to us now, but stuff in general, possession, material wealth is more of what's being intoned by that term that in modern translations is often translated just to money. You'll notice that it has a capital M a lot of time because there was this almost pagan notion of this being an idol or a deity or a rival to God. And I think that's a great contrast. That is what we get throughout the rest of the teachings of Jesus. This idea that your stuff really is kind of a rival, that people are going to value things one way or another, as we see in Matthew chapter 13 with the micro parables of the pearl and the corresponding micro parable of the treasure that's buried in the field. People are going to value things. People are going to treasure things. People should do that because they're made to worship and celebrate things of true value. But the intonation of the text, both in the Gospels and everywhere else, is that humans are wont to obsess with our stuff, like goblins who like shiny things or dragons who protect their hoards, and it screws us up inside and gets us twisted around. Then the more that stuff doesn't satisfy, the more we tend to want to get our hands on more of it, and it just keeps slipping through our fingers and it doesn't work. And ultimately in Matthew chapter 19, we get that bit where a guy who has a lot of material wealth comes up to Jesus and has the whole exchange about what do I got to do to be saved? And it comes down to Jesus saying, oh, go sell all your stuff. And that doesn't go over very well. And he walks away sad because he's a dragon twisted up inside and sitting on his hoard of gold, and he doesn't want to get rid of it. And then Jesus says the whole thing that we talked about a few months ago, which is, I tell you the truth, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And we talked about the game Skyrim and how you're only allowed to carry so much stuff. And when you pass a certain weight with all of the items you've accumulated, all of your mammon, you end up hunched over and moving really, really slow, and you're completely crippled and ineffective. But you got all your things in your backpack. I have all my things. Like, what if I need a butterfly or a strawberry or a horn of a gorlonk at some point? Well, it's right there in my backpack. I'll be just fine. I've got this Dwemer wrench. I might need that at some point. And it's really easy for us to play a game like that or watch somebody play it and be like, that's so stupid. But the reality is, how much of human pursuit really just boils back down to that. Hoard, hoard, hoard. Convert yourself and your life energy and your time into more stuff. It's tempting. It's easy. It's the natural thing. It's the world kingdom values approach to existence and to what motivates on so many levels. And what we're getting here in Matthew chapter 22, when Jesus is like, you hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me with this whole coin taxes question? Show me a coin used for paying the tax. They give him this denarius, something that is emblematic of stuff and converting your existence into a currency that can buy and accumulate more stuff. Whose portrait is this? And whose inscription? Caesar's, they reply. Then he said, well, give to Caesar what's Caesar's and to God what is God's. When they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away. They were amazed because they knew he'd been teaching this stuff about stuff. They knew that he had been articulating this skeptical view of stuff, even suggesting that it might be an albatross, it might be a burden, it might be the kind of thing that could be very, very dangerous to your soul and to your right relationship with your king. It might be so cumbersome that you couldn't bring yourself to kneel before the king and assume the right posture. And maybe if the stuff doesn't go, at least the attitude toward the stuff probably needs to go. That stuff, we learn from what Jesus says over in Luke, is the kind of thing that maybe the true kingdom citizen wants to think about using to advance kingdom things while you still have access to all your stuff and all of your possessions, because the kingdom deal lasts and the stuff, well, it just doesn't last because of moths and rust and thieves and all that business. I also think they walked away astonished because it was just brilliant, off the cuff, in the face of all kinds of pressure. Everybody's looking. It's 50 on 1. You got both ends of the political spectrum bearing down on him. And he's like, yeah, I think I can do this in 2 sentences. Here we go. And the defeated parties know that they just got their butts handed to them. So they just left him and walk away. We're going to bounce back to these themes as we move forward into the next test, which is the very next anecdote that comes up. But before we do that, I want to point you towards something that I mentioned over on the YouTube channel a while back. My friend Bethany just made her first ever children's book. She wrote it, she illustrated it. I love it. It's called Lulu the Beaver, and it's about this creative little beaver who wants to go and do things that are outside the box and make things that are awesome and indulge this creative impulse in good and redemptive ways. But it's hard because there are things in this little world the beavers are expected to do. And it's this beautiful story of Lulu the Beaver overcoming those pressures, being what she needs to be, but also taking these chances and going and doing these next things. It's beautifully presented artistically, and the route that she has gone to get this done is a Kickstarter. So I want to ask a favor. I would be so grateful if you would take a second to go to luluthebeaver.com, and then the main button right there that you'll see as soon as you pull that up that you can click on takes you right to the Kickstarter page. I would be so grateful. If nothing else, if you would just go and check that out, Bethany will see the traffic and be encouraged by that, or maybe take that even a step further and just get your hands on this really beautiful, really helpful, really meaningful book written by someone I very, very much respect. Again, that's luluthebeaver.com, and high five to my friend Bethany for making something beautiful and redemptive and good that will do good in the lives of people. Great accomplishment, lady, and thank you all in advance for going and checking it out. I think you're really going to dig it. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.